I am a 24-year-old male currently living with my grandfather Roland, 72, after my mother Amanda passed away 8 months ago due to breast cancer. The situation I'm in with my father Michael, 49, and sister Brittany, 27, is really complicated and painful, but I need to get this off my chest and see if I'm handling things the right way. For some context, my grandfather Roland has been a huge part of my life since I was born. He's a retired architect who built his own beautiful property about 20 minutes away from where we used to live. The property is around 5 acres with a stunning main house that he designed himself, 2 guest houses, and some farmland that he leases out. He's not just wealthy in terms of property, he's also one of the kindest and most genuine people I know. My mother was his only child and they were extremely close. I think that's part of why I always made an effort to spend time with him. Growing up, I would spend almost every weekend at his place. He taught me how to fish in the small pond on his property, showed me how to fix things around the house, and even got me interested in architecture and property management. These are some of my best childhood memories. The problem has always been that my father and sister never shared this connection with my grandfather. Even when I was young, I noticed how they would make excuses to skip family gatherings at his place. My sister would suddenly have important study groups on the weekends we were supposed to visit, and my father would claim he had work emergencies. My mother used to get really upset about this in the beginning. She would try to convince them to come along, sometimes even argue with my father about it, but eventually she just gave up and accepted that they would never get along with her father. What makes this even more bizarre is that my grandfather has always been incredibly generous with them despite their cold attitude. He paid for half of my sister's college tuition without her even asking, sent expensive gifts on every birthday and Christmas, and even offered to help my father start his own business, which my father declined. He never asked for anything in return except maybe a thank you call or a visit once in a while, but even that seemed too much for them. When my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer 2 years ago, my grandfather was devastated, but he stepped up in every way possible. He helped cover the medical bills, drove her to chemotherapy appointments when my father was too busy with work, and spent hours sitting with her in the hospital. I was busy with my own job but tried to help as much as I could. My father and sister would visit mom at the hospital, but they would leave as soon as my grandfather arrived. It was like they couldn't even be in the same room as him. After mom passed away 8 months ago, things got even worse. My father and sister completely cut off contact with my grandfather. They didn't even show up for the memorial service my grandfather organized a month after the funeral. He had arranged everything so beautifully, mom's favorite flowers everywhere, her favorite songs playing softly in the background, and pictures from throughout her life displayed around his house. About 50 people showed up to share their memories of mom, but my father and sister couldn't be bothered to come. I remember how my grandfather kept looking at the door that day, hoping they would show up. Since then, I've been the only one visiting him regularly. I couldn't bear the thought of him being alone in that big house, grieving for his only child. I would drive over after work and spend weekends with him. We would talk about mom, look at old photos, and sometimes just sit quietly together. It helped both of us deal with our loss. Last month, my grandfather invited all 3 of us, me, my father, and my sister, for a weekend stay at his place. He said he had something important to discuss with all of us and specifically requested that everyone be present. I tried my best to convince my father and sister to come. I told them it was important to grandfather and that he was probably feeling lonely after mom's death. Their response shocked me even though I should have seen it coming. My father laughed and said, "Now that Amanda is gone, I don't have to pretend to like that old man anymore. Tell him we're busy." When I tried to argue, he got angry and said he had wasted enough years of his life trying to please that controlling old bastard and he was done. My sister sided with him and said she was glad they could finally cut him out of their lives. She even said she only tolerated him all these years because mom would get upset otherwise. I was horrified by their response. How could they be so cruel? This was the man who had helped raise me, who had supported our family in every way possible, who had been there for mom until her last breath. I went to my grandfather's place alone that weekend, feeling angry and disappointed with my father and sister. At his place, my grandfather revealed something that changed everything. He said that since he was getting old, he wanted to get his affairs in order. The property we were sitting in, worth several $1,000,000 due to its size and location, needed to be transferred to someone who would take care of it the way he had. He said he had initially planned to divide it between me and my sister, but after seeing how they behaved after my mother's death, he had changed his mind. He wanted to transfer everything to me since I was the only one who stood by him when he needed support the most. I was overwhelmed by his decision. Despite my anger at my father and sister's behavior, I felt guilty about accepting such a huge gift when my sister was being left out. But my grandfather insisted this was his decision to make. He said he had watched how I helped manage the property over the past few months, how I genuinely cared about the place and the people working on the farm, and he knew I would honor his legacy. He had already spoken to his lawyer and wanted to start the paperwork next month. I decided not to tell my father and sister about this. I knew they would only create drama and try to manipulate the situation. Instead, I moved in with my grandfather permanently since he needed help managing the property and I could do my IT job from home anyway. When my father and sister found out I had moved in with grandfather, they were upset and said I was choosing sides. Maybe I am, but I'm choosing to stand by the person who has always been there for our family, who loved my mother unconditionally, and who now needs support in his old age. I know some might think I should feel bad about accepting such a huge gift while my sister gets nothing, but honestly, I don't. They made their choices long ago and now they have to live with the consequences. Ida for accepting my grandfather's property? Update 1. It's been 3 weeks since my last post and things have gotten really messy. I didn't tell my father and sister about the property transfer, but somehow the news got out anyway. The way they found out makes this whole situation even more dramatic. My grandfather's next door neighbor, Mrs. Wilson, is this elderly lady who's been living there for about 30 years. She's known for being the neighborhood gossip and is always trying to peek into everyone's business. Last week, she overheard my grandfather talking to his lawyer on the porch about the property transfer. Instead of minding her own business, she immediately called her friend Linda, who happens to be my father's cousin. Within hours, the news had spread through the entire family like wildfire. The reaction was instant and overwhelming. My father started bombarding me with calls. I saw 47 missed calls from him in just one day. When I didn't pick up, because honestly, what was there to talk about? He switched to sending me these long, angry messages. He called me manipulative and accused me of taking advantage of my grandfather's grief to steal what he called their inheritance. He even brought up how he had to put up with my grandfather for 27 years of marriage and now he was getting nothing in return. My sister was even worse. She sent me a series of messages calling me names I don't even want to repeat here. She said I was just like our grandfather, cold, calculating, and manipulative. She brought up how grandfather had paid for half her college tuition and said that proved he had obligations to her. The fact that she was using his own generosity against him now really showed her true colors. But the worst part wasn't their direct attacks, it was what they did behind my back. They started spreading vicious lies about me to our extended family. They told everyone that I had been manipulating my grandfather since Mom's death, poisoning his mind against them, and isolating him from the family. According to them, I had planned this all along and had deliberately kept them away from grandfather so I could convince him to give me everything. Some relatives actually believed them. My Aunt Sarah, Mom's cousin, called me crying about how disappointed she was in me. Uncle Pete, who I've always been close to, sent me this long message about how I needed to do the right thing and convince grandfather to split the property fairly. Even my mother's best friend, who had known me since I was a baby, reached out to express her concern about my behavior. The worst part was that no one bothered to ask for my side of the story. No one mentioned how my father and sister had completely abandoned grandfather after Mom died. No one talked about how they skipped the memorial service or how they hadn't called him even once in 8 months. It was like everyone had collectively forgotten how badly they had treated him. My grandfather was in the kitchen when I got one particularly nasty message from my sister. I must have made some sort of sound because he asked me what was wrong. I hadn't wanted to burden him with all this drama, but he insisted on knowing what was upsetting me. When I showed him the messages and explained what was happening, he was furious. I had never seen him so angry before. He immediately called my father. I could hear him clearly from across the room. He told my father to stop spreading lies about me or he would report him for harassment. He reminded him how they had neglected to visit my mother in the hospital, how they had skipped her memorial service, and how they had cut off all contact after her death. Then he revealed something that shocked me. Apparently, this wasn't even the first time my father had shown his true colors. Back when my parents were newly married, my father had tried to convince my mother to pressure grandfather into selling this property and giving them their share of the money. He had argued that since Mom was an only child, she deserved half of everything right away. My mother had refused, saying she would never ask her father to sell the home he had built with his own hands. This had led to huge fights between them. My grandfather had overheard one of these fights when my parents were visiting. He had been coming down the stairs when he heard my father yelling at Mom about the property. That was when he realized my father's true nature, but he kept quiet about it for my mother's sake. He never told her he knew about these fights because he didn't want to cause more problems in their marriage. After hearing this, I felt like I was seeing my father clearly for the first time. All these years, he had just been waiting for a chance to get his hands on grandfather's property. His coldness, his constant excuses to avoid visiting, his rushing to leave whenever he had to come, it all made sense now. He had probably been hoping that after Mom's death, grandfather would sell the property and divide the money between me and my sister. No wonder he was so angry when he found out about the transfer. I decided to block both of them and anyone else who believed their lies. I don't need that kind of negativity in my life. I've also started saving all their threatening messages in case we need them for legal purposes. The property transfer process has started and should be completed in a couple of months. My grandfather has assured me that everything is being done legally and properly so they can't contest it later. Sometimes I feel sad about how things have turned out, but then I remember how they treated grandfather after Mom died and my sadness turns to anger. They're showing their true colors now, and I'm actually grateful for it. At least I know exactly who they are and what they really care about, and it's not family or love or loyalty. It's just money. Update 2, well, you won't believe what happened yesterday. I was in the kitchen making lunch when I heard the doorbell ring. My grandfather went to answer it, and suddenly I heard multiple voices in the entryway. When I walked out to check, I was shocked to see my father and sister standing there, both with tears streaming down their faces. The scene that followed was something straight out of a bad movie. My father, who I've never seen cry in my entire life, was actually down on his knees in front of grandfather. He kept saying how sorry he was for everything and how much he regretted his behavior. My sister was standing behind him, makeup running down her face, nodding along and saying how much she missed her grandpa. My grandfather, bless him, just stood there calmly watching this performance. I could tell from his face that he wasn't buying any of it, but he let them continue. They must have rehearsed their speech because they hit all the right notes, how they'd been consumed by grief after mom's death, how they hadn't known how to deal with their emotions, how they regretted cutting off contact, and how they wanted to be a family again. But then things started to unravel. After the initial round of apologies and tears, my father started talking about the real reason for their visit. He said it wasn't fair to leave Brittany out of the inheritance. He talked about how mom would have wanted both her children to be treated equally, and how as my mother's daughter, Brittany deserved an equal share in everything. My sister kept wiping her eyes and saying she just wanted to be close to her grandpa again, but you could see her eyes light up every time my father mentioned the property. My grandfather listened to everything without interrupting. When they finally ran out of things to say, he spoke very quietly but firmly. He told them that if they had really cared about family relationships, they would have shown up 8 months ago when he was grieving for his only child. He pointed out how they hadn't called once in all these months, hadn't even sent a text to check if he was okay. Then he did something that completely blindsided them. He pulled out his phone and showed them that he had been recording the entire conversation. The change in their demeanor was instant. My father's face turned red with anger, and he jumped up from his knees. He started yelling about how he would contest this in court, how he would prove that grandfather was being manipulated by me, and how he would make sure Brittany got her fair share. My sister joined in, suddenly dropping all pretense of missing her grandpa, and started threatening to go to the media with stories about how we had taken advantage of an old man. My grandfather just smiled and held up his phone again. He suggested they talk to a lawyer first and find out how strong their case would be given their previous behavior in this recorded conversation where they basically admitted they only came back for the property. He told them he had been recording every interaction ever since they started spreading lies about me, just in case something like this happened. They left looking completely defeated and humiliated. After they were gone, my grandfather revealed that he had actually been expecting something like this. He said that people's true nature often comes out when property and money are involved, and he had seen enough in his lifetime to know how these things usually play out. That's why he had started recording everything weeks ago. I was amazed by how well he had handled the whole situation. While I had been angry and hurt by their behavior, he had stayed calm and prepared for every possibility. He told me that he had learned these lessons the hard way, dealing with relatives who had tried to claim parts of this property even when my mom was alive. Looking back at their visit now, I can see how fake everything was. The timing was too convenient. They showed up right after finding out that the property transfer process had started. Their tears dried up as soon as grandfather mentioned the recording. Even their apologies were focused more on why they deserved the property than on how they had hurt us with their behavior. My grandfather's lawyer called this morning to let us know that the property transfer is proceeding smoothly. He also said we shouldn't worry about any legal challenges from my father and sister. With the recorded conversation as evidence, no court would take their claims seriously. I feel like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders. At least now we won't have to deal with any more fake tears or sudden appearances. Update 3, it's been 6 months since everything happened, and life has changed completely. The property transfer was completed last month, and I'm now the legal owner of everything, though I made it clear to my grandfather that he's still in charge. I want him to stay in control as long as he wants to. This is his home that he built with his own hands, and I'm just here to help manage things and make sure his legacy continues. As expected, my father and sister tried to contest the transfer. They actually went to 3 different lawyers, but each one gave them the same advice after hearing the recorded conversation. They had no case. The last lawyer apparently told them that their recorded admission of only coming back for the property would completely destroy any claims about manipulation or undue influence. Their response to this defeat was exactly what you'd expect. My father has gone around telling everyone who will listen that he no longer considers me his son. At a recent family wedding, which I didn't attend, he apparently introduced my sister as his only child. My sister has taken this even further. She's gone through all her social media and deleted every photo that had me in it, even our childhood pictures. She's blocked anyone who mentions me to her and has apparently told her friends that she's an only child. The extended family has mostly sided with them, mainly because my father has been spreading stories about how I manipulated an old man into disinheriting his granddaughter. Some relatives I grew up with, who used to be close to me, now cross the street if they see me coming. It hurt at first, but I've realized that if they're so quick to believe lies about me without even asking for my side of the story, they weren't really family to begin with. On the brighter side, my grandfather and I have grown even closer over these months. We've started working on renovating the guest houses. He's teaching me everything about construction and design, just like he learned from his father. We've also started an exciting new project. We're converting part of the farmland into an organic vegetable farm. My grandfather's eyes light up when he talks about this project. He says it reminds him of the small vegetable garden my mom used to keep when she was young. The house feels more alive now. We hired a local landscaping company to restore my mom's old garden, and my grandfather spends hours there every morning. Sometimes I find him sitting on the bench Mom used to love, just looking at the flowers and smiling. I think he feels closer to her there. Sometimes, usually late at night, I do miss how things used to be with my father and sister. I miss the family dinners, the inside jokes, even the silly arguments. But then I remember how quickly they showed their true colors when money was involved. I remember how they treated my grandfather after Mom died, and how they only came back when they thought they could get something from him. Those memories help me realize that I'm better off without that kind of toxicity in my life. My grandfather told me something interesting yesterday. He said that sometimes the family you choose is better than the family you're born with. He said he's proud of me for standing up for what's right, even when it meant standing alone. Coming from him, that means everything. I've learned more about integrity and strength from him in these past months than I had in all the years before. The property is just a place, but the lessons I've learned here about loyalty, honesty, and standing up for what's right, those are the real inheritance my grandfather has given me.